All right, welcome back. Welcome into the Front Row Podcast. I'm Coach Mark Gottfried, and I've had some amazing guests, but today I'm actually really fired up because just in a kind of a limited way, I've gotten to know Blake Lawrence. But just to give you a little background, and I want Blake, you to kind of explain it as well too, but Blake played football at Nebraska. I actually looked you up, Blake. You were a linebacker and a quarterback in high school. Both ways. You went both sides of the ball. But had a great career and founded some companies. But he's really sitting in an amazing position now as one of the co-founders of a company called Opendorse. And it's, to spell it, O-P-E-N and D-O-R-S-E, and Opendorse.com. But they've got a number of, and I don't want to get it wrong, I'm going to let you tell me, but probably over 100,000 student athletes that are signed with Opendorse as far as with NIL, name, image, and likeness, and the opportunity for student athletes to get compensation. So anyway, Blake, thank you, man. Glad for you. Glad that you're coming on.
Yeah, Coach, I appreciate it. It's a big day. I mean, you timed this perfect. We timed this perfect to talk about the future of athlete compensation, right?
This is amazing, and what's happening for student athletes in college athletics. And really, there's so many layers and parts of the decision landmark ruling where the NCAA is going to, I guess, first of all, back pay a bunch of student athletes back to 2016, and I'm going to let you kind of explain it. But before we do that, Blake, just kind of tell us a little bit about how, because in my opinion, you seem like you were way ahead of the game. You know, like a lot of people have tried to monetize and capitalize endorsements with student athletes, but you have been way out in front of this, like way out. And so kind of give the listeners kind of an idea of how you got started and a little bit about Opendorse.
Yeah, I'm sure your listeners, if they know you know college sports, and the words, the letters NIL have been mentioned on the podcast, and everyone probably knows what that is. And a lot of folks think NIL is new. NIL is not new to sports. It's new to college sports, but name, image, and likeness, and athletes making money off their endorsements and whatnot. It's been around for a long time. And Opendorse, we started in 2012, going back and helping professional athletes use social media to monetize their name, image, and likeness. So this is something that, I played football in Nebraska. After my career was done, started to help athletes on the team transition to the pros, and social media became this new way that they were building up their marketing value. And it was really hard to get these athletes to actually follow through on their endorsement deals and sponsorship deals, actually send out posts and on Instagram or tweets, Facebook, whatever it was. And so we built Opendorse back in 2012 to simplify the process of getting professional athletes to fulfill their social media endorsements. So it made it as easy as an athlete gets an alert to their phone that says you'll get paid $1,000 to send out this tweet, a big green button or a little red button, and hit the green button, the tweet goes out, they get paid, and we simplify all the payments and tax processes, make sure the agents knew about it, the association knew about it, so everything's protected, and it makes it super easy. And that's very niche thing to do in 2012. The market for professional athletes making money this way is about 5,000 athletes in North America that could really utilize this product. And then in July 2021, when the NCAA changed the rules, the market went to 500,000 and overnight. And it's been explosive growth for us as a company, and excited. But we started this athletes helping athletes, and now there's just a lot more athletes need help.
Well, it's an amazing concept, and congratulations to you, because like I said, you guys are out in front of it. And I'm guessing, just again, kind of for the layman, I played college athletics and I coached obviously for a long time, for 30-something years. But even on the professional level, I'm just going to guess here, maybe you have some insight on this. Obviously the superstars, their endorsements for those guys, I wouldn't say they're easy, but they're fairly easy. Everybody's coming to them through their agents. If I'm LeBron James, if I'm, whomever, Tom Brady. But there's a lot of guys on the team, I'm guessing, that aren't in that position. They're still pros. They're still professional. They're in the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball, but maybe they don't have the platform. Am I saying that correctly?
That's right. If you look at, if you got a talent agent out there that's representing a bunch of athletes, it's kind of this 80-20 rule where 80% of the money that agent's making is coming from 20% of their clients. And so the majority of the energy that's put into helping athletes make money at the pro level is into those 20%, maybe those couple athletes that really have true marketing value. And because it takes just as much work to do a $100,000 endorsement deal as it does a $1,000 endorsement deal. So if you are limited in your resources as a service business, you're going to aim for the biggest number possible and focus all your energy there because it's still the same amount of time. When you introduce technology, Opendorse can manage a $100,000 deal and a $1,000 deal, and it takes the same amount of time for us, but we can scale that $1,000 deal 100 times. And so that's where our business kind of serves that longer tail. Now, do we work with the athletes that are on the cover of EA Sports, the new video game? The cover just dropped this week, and yeah, EA Sports used Opendorse to do the deals with the cover athletes, but we also are doing deals with 100 plus athletes at a Division II school to get paid $20 to promote a local car dealership, right? So like little things like that, you got to handle it at scale. But you are right about distribution, and a lot of these athletes don't have an agent to help them out, but they do have an app, and that's Opendorse.
Yeah, wow, it's so interesting to me, and having coached for so many years, and I've had players, and all through the years, they would kind of gripe every now and then. I'm at NC State or I'm at Alabama, and our players walk into the bookstore like all the other students on campus, and they see a jersey, and it's their name. It's their jersey. It's their number and their name on the back. And they're always like, Coach, this is kind of screwed up, man. I mean, they're selling, my jersey in the store, which has the markings of whichever school you're on, but, they weren't able to do that. So let me ask you this question, Blake. Here's an interesting one for me. So your company, you're up and running, and you're involved with a lot of professional athletes, and you guys are doing very well. And then all of a sudden, boom, the NCAA passes legislation that says college student athletes can now, through their name, image, and likeness, they can now receive compensation. And tell me what that was like right when that happened, because I know you've got to be going, whoa, okay, whole new world out here for us right there. How did that feel, and what was your thought process right when it happened?
The day, July 1, 2021, was a busy day. I was in Los Angeles. I was at the Elite 11 with all the top quarterbacks in the country. Remember, Spencer Rattler was there as a coach, coming back to help the athletes, and Malik Willis, and then Quinn Ewers was competing in the competition, Cade Klubnik. And so it was a day where we're actually educating the future quarterbacks across college football on NIL, but it was that day. And what's interesting is that, being a former athlete myself, you don't just show up on game day and hope it all works out. You got to prepare, right? So our preparation for the first day of NIL started back in 2019 when I got a letter in the mail from the NCAA. And the NCAA had reached out to Opendorse and said, we are preparing for a world where athletes may receive NIL compensation. How does this work? Okay. And so at that point in time, we were 7 years into the business, providing technology. And once we launched it, we partnered with the NFLPA, MLBPA, NHLPA, PGA Tour, LPGA, Team USA, every national governing body. So this was the only technology platform in the athlete endorsement industry. And the NCAA said, well, we should probably talk to these guys. And it kind of got to see under the hood about what was coming. And in 2020, we introduced a product called Opendorse Ready, which schools could use to educate athletes on what is NIL, educate their staff, their coaches, and be prepared. So we were waiting for that moment, and the day came. And once the dollars started flowing, that's when we realized, oh, this is going to be bigger than we thought. And who's paying the athletes is going to be different than we thought. And I'd love to talk to you more about that.
Well, what's interesting to me, first of all, again, I can't even imagine for you guys. And that's interesting that they reached out. That's typical of kind of the NCAA trying to get the feel of what's getting ready to come. But I tell everybody all the time, Blake, I played, I coached, I'm ecstatic for the student athletes. I think this is a long overdue. I coached Ed O'Bannon at UCLA for 5 years. I was with Ed, who then sued the NCAA, and it all originated from an EA Sports game when he's sitting around on the couch, and they're all playing EA Sports, and they've got the UCLA 95 national championship team, and there's this slender, black kid who's number 31, which is Ed, left-handed, and so everybody knows it's him, although, it's not his name on it, and his buddies asked him, how much you getting for this? And he was like, I don't get anything. And there began the process of the lawsuit that eventually went all the way to the Supreme Court. So anyway, I'm fired up for guys. But since that time, and here it comes into college athletics. In my view too, it's a little bit chaotic, because first of all, there's not a lot of transparency, which I think is where, and I'd love for you to explain a little bit about how you guys do that, because I think that's so important. I was at an event, Los Angeles, last night. Prominent coach in the Big Ten was there. We got to talking about it, and they're still frustrated because nobody knows what's real. They don't know the numbers that are real. And a kid might say, or an agent may say, hey, it's going to cost you $600,000 to get this guy. And they're like, well, based on what? I mean, who's offer? What's the offer out there? And unlike pro sports where, it's fairly transparent, it's hard. But you guys have really kind of done a great job with that. You've kind of figured that out a little bit as far as what's real, like real money,
right,
and what's not real money. Because I would imagine there's a lot of stories out there and there's a lot of untruths.
Certainly. And I think this is something that I love how Opendorse has evolved, right? And if you think about, again, making it easy for athletes to understand their value, build it, capitalize on it, and it's all in this app. But this app is used by more than 100,000 student athletes, as you mentioned earlier. Hundreds of millions of dollars a year flow through this platform into athletes' pockets. And our job is to make sense of it. And so we have more than 200 schools now that partner with Opendorse so they can get an understanding of what is real, what's not. The collectives you hear about, these donor groups that are out there paying athletes, there's 40 of them that currently use Opendorse to track all their payments, to get insights on it. And so, our role is to first and foremost help athletes make money. As you mentioned, this is something that's really important to athletes. Most of them don't realize until it's too late that this is the peak of their earning potential in college. And so we have to help them. But when you do that enough times over, you can extract some really interesting insights. And so you can see on my shelf here, I'll describe these. These are NIL books. They're like literally physically books because our coaches and athletic directors like to put them in their pocket and pull them out. So when you're talking about basketball, like there's a basketball NIL book. In here is going to show, based on over 150,000 NIL transactions and $100 million plus in transactions, like what does a Division I men's basketball guard actually make on an annual basis, right? I can break this down into, you want to know what an Atlantic 10 forward makes? If you're a top 10 Atlantic, a top 10 men's basketball player in the Atlantic 10, how about that? $48,437 a year. That's what your annual earnings expectation should be. I can do the same for women's basketball in the Big South, right? But this is what you can do. You can take and extract the actual data and say what's real. And so we're trying to provide that transparency, that visibility to the market. And it's just going to get a lot more clear, again, once these new rules are in place in 2025.
So that's such a great tool, because I keep hearing it all the time from people, all of my friends in coaching. It's really hard to navigate, as you're recruiting a player. So they're all the frustration is how, somebody just says, they throw out these numbers, and it's almost like, where are you getting those numbers from? And I guess the market would determine if one school offers X amount of money, but you never know what's really accurate in that. So I would guess, Blake, that you have heard and come across, and I don't ever want you to, say names and schools. That's not important on this show, but just in general, some really interesting stories and situations where either the numbers get inflated or somebody's trying to use leverage to get more money. Because I've had people, Blake, tell me, some coaches say they've just had guys walk right in the office. Hey, coach, if you can't give me $200,000, I'm in the portal tomorrow. Get it done. And so what are, you have one or two interesting, I'm sure you do.
I do, yeah.
Things that you've heard or that you've come across with NIL?
Yeah, certainly. I think what's happening in basketball, Coach, I would not envy if you were back on campus right now trying to navigate this. All right. Now, it's not just NIL, it's a combination of NIL and the portal situation, right? Yeah. And so every athlete's a free agent every semester. And if you have anyone in your life that's coaching you at all, good, bad, or indifferent, somebody might tell you, hey, just put your name out there, because at the end of the day, you can be accepted right back on your team. I know it throws off a wrinkle in some people that makes them real nervous, but agents are coaching athletes to tell their coaches, I'm going to the portal no matter what, right? And they're doing that to create leverage, because now the coach is like, I don't even want the announcement that one of my players is going to the portal, because it impacts recruiting.
Right.
And so they're all being coached to talk to coaches about their threat to leave before they even actually threaten to leave, so they can re-up their NIL compensation package while still on campus. And so what's happened in one market in particular, an interesting story where there were 6 players left on the team, and they all went in the coach's office, kind of like that scene in Rudy, or they say, I'm not playing unless you get my jersey
down. I'll put my jersey.
They're all laying their jerseys down until the checks come out, right? And so what happened is that in one day, a coach had to make a decision between having 0 players on their roster or more than quadrupling their NIL budget, if you will, to keep 6. And that's tough. I mean, that's a real interesting thing, because also NIL currently in its current state, it's not controlled by the school. No way, right? So a coach is in a position where they have to, in an instant, promise dollars they have no control over, in hopes that they get an athlete to stay, which ultimately doesn't mean they stay, even if they get the deal. I wouldn't envy it.
Yeah. I think in basketball and football, obviously every sport, they're important, but they're all different. Everything's different, in basketball and recruiting. And I've recruited in the SEC and the ACC, and I used to joke with people, and I say NLI stands for now it's legal. And, because, for years and years, there's always kind of been this underlying at times where somebody's floating it out there that, they need this or they need that, and that's just part of the turf. And I just can't even imagine for coaches right now, because, like you mentioned, the combination of NIL and the portal almost being legislated almost at the exact same time. I know it wasn't exactly, but pretty close. And they feed off of each other. And I think I read where, student athletes can transfer up to 4 times without having to sit out a year, which is just nuts for me to think of. I look at pro sports, Blake, and you take the NBA and NFL and Major League Baseball or hockey. I don't know that those leagues could survive with no rules whatsoever, with every player as a free agent every year, with no transparency really of what they're making in salary. If you took this to the NBA, they would be like, absolutely not. I mean, there's no way we would ever. They'd collapse in a day. Yeah. And here we are in college athletics, and we've kind of, typical of the NCAA, in my opinion. They're not the brightest stars in the sky, in my opinion. But anyway, it's like, what are you people thinking? What are you thinking right now? And usually it takes a lawsuit that gets them to move. And if there's a lawsuit coming, they react. And I think in this case, which we talked about at the top of our show here, we got a big one that came out last couple of days here, and it's going to change the game in a big way. So what's your thoughts on, before we talk about the new rule that just the lawsuit that was settled, as far as comparing the college system like I talked about to the pro sports, would you agree that it's just kind of, it's chaos. Great for you. You guys have been doing great with Opendorse, but for the rest of the world, it's like, what is happening out here? It's chaos.
Yeah, it is. I think that you couldn't imagine setting up a sports ecosystem that is the NCAA. Like you would never create this from scratch, right? But there's no going back.
Mm-mm.
And so you have to understand that right now the athletes are winning. I mean, in a capitalistic society, which is America,
Mm-hmm.
the dollars are going to flow to those who create the most value. And in college sports, the minute that college athletes could get paid, the checks started to stack up and the athletes started to get paid. And it's starting to threaten the ecosystem that has greatly favored everyone else in college sports.
I agree.
And coach, I got to say, the coaches have done pretty damn well.
I'm not arguing. I'm not complaining.
As a nonprofit, these dollars got to go somewhere. But
Right.
once they can flow to the athletes, man, they will. And the impact of kind of where things are going with this settlement, it really is just the beginning of college athletes getting a little bit more of the revenue that's flowing into this industry. And at 22%, again, I want to talk about some of how these numbers are calculated, but at 22% of the blended average revenue share for Power 5 schools or Power 4 schools, that's pretty low when you think about revenue sharing in professional sports. I mean, it's 50-50 in the NFL. I think it's around 50-50 as well as the NBA. And so college athletes are settling at its current time for a 22% of the total rev. And you got to think as a capitalistic society, eventually that number will go even higher.
Yeah, it's going to go up. I think what we're seeing right now, it's the beginning of, could be the beginning of the end of what we've always known the NCAA to be, but it's the beginning of the process to where, in time, I agree with you, that number is going to go up. Here's one question I have for you, Blake, in regard to that, and I've read a lot about this in the last couple of days, and it talks a lot about Power 5 conferences and the amount of money that 22% of their total athletic budget, then they would be able to use that. But what about, you take a look at college sports or college Division I, let's just stay in Division I. The Power 5 schools is probably, 1/5 maybe of all the schools out there?
In Division I, yeah.
In Division I. So let's take all of the other schools that aren't in Power 5 conferences, the Appalachian States of the world, the Evansvilles and the Murray States and the, UC Irvines of the world. What about them? What's your thought? How does this impact them?
Yeah, this is something I was running these numbers just this morning because we've got partners across every level of college athletics: D1, D2, D3, NAI, NG, all that. And then, this right now. Do you want to talk a little bit about the settlement, like what's going to happen?
Yes,
I'll do it real quick so
yes.
so the listeners understand. There's $20 billion about, right? That's gonna in this part of the settlement that will be paid to student athletes. Now there's $2.7 billion in back pay. So anyone that played from 2016 to 2020, those that didn't get NIL money, they're gonna get some money. And that money is mostly going to men's basketball and football players, some to women's basketball players, and it's determined on how much they actually played the sport over that time period. Okay, so that's the back pay. The forward pay is what's going to change college athletics forever. Okay. It's about $20 to $22 million per school, permissive cap, that the schools can pay to athletes in the form of NIL payments. So the schools will actually, like if you're going back to the Bama days or NC State days, you would be sitting down with the kid and say, hey, welcome to NC State. Here's your scholarship, here's your room and board. Now you have the Alston payments. And then you say, and here's your NIL, here's your rev share. And that's a negotiable amount. Okay. So you're going to have to work through that and say, this athlete's going to get 400,000 because I think he's a 4-star. Our 5 stars are getting 500,000. Our 2 stars are getting whatever hell it is, right? But you're going to have to set that number, and they're going to negotiate that with you, right? But you're going to have a pool of dollars that you are allocated from the athletic director to help you decide like how to keep your roster, right? And the majority of those money is going to go over to funding 85 players for the football team, right? Which is funding a lot of the dollars that feed the budget anyway. So they're going to get that big lion's share. And so you got this world now where moving forward, the school is going to be spending $20 to $22 million a year paying their athletes for NIL, the use of their NIL and broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the world. The conversations we're having right now is how many schools can quickly fill a $22 million a year budget, right? A bucket. And there's not a ton of them that are like loving this. If you look at the Power Four schools, what percentage of their expenses does this equate to, right? And I did a breakdown by conference. I can give it to you if you're interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the schools. Let's see. The power conferences, SEC, this is on average about 14% of their expenses. So it's about a 14% hit for the SEC.
Blake, is that money, Blake, coming? Is that new money from the NCAA and sharing money like from the basketball tournament, their $1.3 billion they made, or is that just money that an athletic department, we have to come up with that money from our already existing budget? We're just cutting 14% or 22% out of what we already have coming in from revenue.
That's right. It's what you're already having coming in. Yeah. So this is,
Woo.
It's a hit.
So. And I don't want to interrupt you because I want you to come back to your point, but I want to make this point. So again, in talking with one of the associate ADs at UCLA, and the first thing she said was, in time, the fear is, we'll see how this plays out. But because of Title IX in college athletics, where based on your numbers of male participants and female participants, and Title IX is a federal law, and a lot of that has to be based on your general population ratios between men and women. Mm-hmm. But with this amount of money that you have to carve out now that's going to go to the student athletes, there's only so much money to go around in the athletic department. And the fear is men's Olympic sports are going to be the first ones to get cut. Because in balancing that, you got 90 football players, well, that tips the ledger in favor of the men. There's not a women's sport that can create 90 opportunities. And here you come with the trying to balance numbers and get them relatively equal. What's going to end up happening, the fear is, I don't know if you'd agree with that or not, but what I was told is men's Olympic sports are going to be the first ones to go. And that would be sad to see.
Well, again, I think that there's what is impacting the athletic director's mind right now, in our conversations with them, I had a couple today already, is how do we fill the bucket? Now, Title IX implications are still to be interpreted. So this is something that moving forward, this $22 million, most folks are thinking, because the way this is worded in the settlement, that these are NIL payments from the school to the student athletes, that the athlete has to have NIL value. And because it's broadcast NIL, most of them are going to tie it to that. That if your sport is not on broadcast, is not generating revenue, then you are not entitled to a revenue share payment for NIL rights, right? So some of it might find its way into the courts from women suing men because it's not Title IX compliant, but then their justifications like this is not tied to education. These are educational benefits. These are name, image, likeness, and marketing rights benefits that are just different. We'll see.
Yeah.
Right? We'll see. Now, as you mentioned this, athletic director saying, how do I fill this bucket? If you're going to have to come up with a 14% hit, if you're an SEC athletic director, you got to look at it and say, all right, let's find things that equal 14% of our budget and say, do we need those things? Mm-hmm. And some of those things might be sports, just simply sports on campus. Mm-hmm. Some of them might be coaches' salaries. Mm-hmm. Potentially, like if there's a 14% pay cut for coaches to fund the future of college athletics, is that okay? Mm-hmm. Well, you have to go raise more money from donors and fill the bucket that way. We'll see.
So take in football, Blake, take the Alabamas, Ohio States, Clemson's, USC's, Michigan's, whoever, kind of those schools that have kind of been at the top of the food chain right there. Like how much that bucket, you think that number becomes 22 million? I think, is there a cap at 22? Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, 22 is, it's permissive cap up to 22 is what they're saying. Yep.
And so those schools, I'm going to guess, they're going to get to 22 pretty quick. I mean, they have to be good in men's basketball, football, maybe women's basketball,
Yeah.
And then how, Blake, do you think this plays out? And I've been on campuses now too, where because of Title IX, I mean, literally, I've been one. If I put a picture on the hallway wall of a men's basketball player, I had the women's basketball coach coming in saying, I want one right over there just like yours, no matter what. It didn't matter. If I used a private plane to go recruit, the women's basketball coach went into the athletic director's office and said, I need a private plane to go recruit just like he does, because we're all equal. So I would guess if you're an athletic director and you were giving out money, that your money in that bucket, we're calling it that kind of the NIL bucket here with this new legislation that just got, or the case that just got settled. I can't imagine a whole lot of women's coaches sitting back allowing that to happen if it's not equally divided between men and women. Yes or no? What's your thoughts?
The very first call that I received from a partner on this topic was not about how to allocate dollars across this quarterback and this running back, this point guard, this one. It was about the narrative around why football's going to get this much, why men's going to get this much, and why women's basketball is going to get this much. Like, the very first most important thing is the story of how these dollars are distributed across these things.
Blake, I've lived it for 30 years.
I know they're not going to.
And I'm not rooting against them. I'm not rooting against women's sports. I'm just saying I've been in those conversations where, tit for tat. You get this, I get that. Just the way it is.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the more unique things in this new era of college athletics is that for the first time, I know that athletic directors have always been trying to move resources across a spectrum of sports and wants and wishes, right? Mostly 4 to 5 sports on a campus that have a compelling reason to knock on the door and say, I need something. And then the AD's got to listen. The rest of them are thankful they're there, right? Mm-hmm. And, I say that because I think anyone in this industry, that's okay, to admit that. Everyone understands there's 4 or 5 sports on a campus that are driving the economic machine of college athletics. But now, when it comes to salary cap management, this will be the first time ever that there might be a moment in the future where you've got a team that's going to make a deep run in the tournament, that's got 5th-year seniors, a couple All-Americans that are a heavy, expensive basketball team. Meanwhile, you got a new head coach on the football team that's trying to ramp up and get some kids in the portal. And so he's going to be wanting to hit as big of a budget he possibly can, but he's being told to wait until these guys in the basketball team go to the NBA, so then we free up some budget to allocate to football. I mean, nobody in the world's ever had to wait on a basketball team season to finish so they can allocate funds to a football team. For player talent. It's just never happened. So it's a new world of managing funds that literally no one's done to this level, and it's going to be exciting.
Blake, another thought that comes to my mind, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, because professional sports, you're like in the NBA, you got 30 teams. And in the NFL, I think now maybe 30, or whatever the number is. But that's a limited number. It's a small group. Right. And outside of market sizes, and, Indianapolis is different than Los Angeles, but still with the NBA, you're always trying to balance that as far as salary caps and all the things so that there's a competitive balance in professional sports. Well, you go into college now, and all things are not equal. There's 350 teams. You've got Power 5 teams. You've got small teams that just, quite frankly, ought to be Division II, but they're Division I. They don't have any kind of budget whatsoever. You've got everything. And then you even go in the women's side, and you look at like women's basketball. UConn, Tennessee, LSU, obviously Caitlin Clark at Iowa. But those are kind of the anomalies. Those actually can drive some revenue into the athletic department budget, but 95% of women's basketball programs, they can't. They just can't. They don't get enough people to come to the games.
They're unprofitable.
They're not. Yeah. And I'm not knocking them. It's just the reality. So all of a sudden, if I'm at one of those schools and I'm getting pressure from Gino at UConn, Tennessee, women's sports, I got to put money into those. Now, 95% of the other women's basketball programs in college, they may not. They just may say, hey, guys, so kind of the rich get richer. All of a sudden, it starts to separate because all things are not equal in college athletics. There's too many schools, too many programs, too many different budgets, too many everything. And it'll be interesting to see how this starts to shake itself out. You know, some schools may want to pay X amount. They may want to give it all to the football. They probably wouldn't, but they probably or the lion's share. So give me some of your thoughts on that, because that to me just seems like it just sets it up for such an imbalance out there with the different levels of schools.
Coach, think about this. I started to mention these percentages earlier. So I'll just say, again, for those listeners out there, I'm going to name a conference, and I'm going to say what percentage, on average, the schools in that conference, what percentage of their budget do they have to, if they wanted to fully fund $21 million a year, all right? Just use that number, okay? What percentage of their budget? So SEC, 14%. Big Ten, 16%. ACC, 18%. Big 12, 23%. Mountain West, 46%. AAC, 50%. Sun Belt, 76%. Conference USA, 79%. MAC, 70%. So that's the average impact to their entire budget. If you are a Conference USA school, the Liberty Flames, they're in the best situation. This is only 37% of Liberty's budget. Jacksonville State is in Conference USA. $21 million is 114% of their current operating budget for the entire athletic department.
Yeah.
They're competing for the same championship. Conference Jacksonville State, at less than $21 million a year in budget, is going up and trying to play for the same title as Ohio State, who has a 10 times larger budget. It's interesting, right?
Well, it's the haves and the have-nots, and I think it separates it even farther than it was, because those schools you can't give up 80% of your athletic budget to give to the student athletes. I mean, you got to travel, you got to get in a hotel, you got to get on an airplane. I mean, there's just not so much. The money runs dry, and so that's going to be an interesting thing. Blake, how about this one for you? Because I talk to people all the time. I got a ton of friends. I went to an event probably 2 weeks ago here in California, and it was for their collective for one of the schools that, just heading to the Big Ten. And the pressure has been on the boosters, the pressure. I think everybody understands. I've played golf with Johnny Van Manziel a few times, and he's a great dude. I really like him, but we get it. Like, his time was when he was at Texas A&M. He was Johnny Football, and he wasn't allowed to capitalize on that. But we get the big star. But now you've got, in the collectives, you got boosters that are being asked to, put 20 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand, 200 grand, whatever, into these collectives. Every school now, they have a kind of an offshoot, can't be directly inside the athletic department, but they're working hand in hand. But they're raising money, and the pressure is on the booster. Here I am, here you are, let's just say at Nebraska. You played there, you love Nebraska, and hey, Blake, okay, I'll write a check for 50 grand, but I don't know if I can do that forever. I don't know if I can do that every single year. And do the collectives begin to diminish a little bit, or with this new ruling, or is that still going to be the emphasis still put there? What do you think?
The role of collectives in college athletics will change in this new era. And a lot of the dollars that are currently flowing into a collective's budget used to flow to the college's budget. And there's been a proactive effort by athletic directors in markets that can afford it to stand on a stage and say, do not give to the athletic department, please give to our collective. And so they're literally just moving money that's already been allocated in some donor's mind to athletics into a sidecar to pay the kids. That'll go back. those dollars are going to go back because the athletic directors say, hey, they're going to stand on the stage 2 years from now or year and a half from now and say, hey, let's go back to the way it was. You guys want a tax deduction? Guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
Just give the foundation. We'll
Mm-hmm.
take it from here.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going to fill the bucket back up internally.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can fund these direct to athlete NIL payments from the schools.
Right.
So the pressure may be alleviated from changing behavior.
Mm-hmm.
But donors have been a significant funding source for college athletics. I mean, it's like 50% of
Mm-hmm.
all of the money
Mm-hmm.
that goes into all of college athletics comes from annual donations.
Mm-hmm.
It is a significant source of dollars. I know that's probably a big part of your life
Mm-hmm.
was hemming and hawing and shaking hands and whatnot.
All the time.
That's all you're doing is raising money, man. But to a good point, it's like half of the money. It is like the donations to college athletic departments and revenue generated from broadcast rights, from sponsorship rights and licensing rights, those things are equal. So it is significantly impacting college athletics, but the behavioral change that college donors had to go through over the last 3 years to give to this random new entity they didn't know much about and to get no benefits from the school, it just got dicey. It'll be a moment in time, and then the role of collectives doesn't go away. It just changes, and we'll talk about kind of what those changes look like.
Blake, I've said, and I've said it here on my podcast, I've told people, and I was for years and years, I was a part of our National Association of Basketball Coaches Board of Directors. I was in meetings with the NCAA, at the NCAA in Indianapolis, in the Taj Mahal buildings, and I've been there, and Mark Emmert for years was a part of that. And Dan Gavitt, who runs the men's basketball tournament, is a great friend of mine. I think he's the most valuable guy they have, because basketball, that tournament, creates all the revenue for. And they've just done a spectacular job. But at the same time, I've always said, the thing that really bothers me about all of this is that the money that they're making off the tournament, and I read this year, and I don't know that these numbers are all the way accurate, but gross revenue was somewhere around $1.3 billion. And it's almost like they still keep getting away with the fact that they're not the ones paying the kids. Like they're not the ones sharing the revenue. It still falls back on the athletic department. Okay, well, you guys can have this X amount of money, but it has to come from your money. And I know there's a lot of money that goes from the tournament to the participants and the units they get for winning. And if you win in the tournament, you get extra units. And, I know all the equations. I've been a part of all of it. But sometimes I just still sit there and go, guys, the cash cow is the tournament, the NCAA tournament. They're the ones that are they're just pulling it in. And I've been to Indianapolis, and I'm glad they got nice buildings, and but it does look like the Taj Mahal now. I mean, it's unreal. And so for me, it's still, they're missing it, because the NCAA ought to be directly participating in student athlete NIL. But I don't know. What's your thoughts on that? Because I have a strong feeling on that, but maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, I want to admit I'm wrong.
No, I would say, I don't have it right in front of me, and I don't want to take our time looking it up, but do you know what the annual contribution, like the check from the NCAA for being in the tournament would be? Like, so you're going back in time, you're on, and your team makes the tournament. How much money would your team get?
I don't know the number of that, and it's really a complicated equation, because you get units for like 6 or 7 years out. So in other words, you go and play in the tournament and you win a game, you're actually getting money for the next handful of years. It's not just one time. So it's actually spread out over a period of time, and you're getting more they call units every time your team advances. So you win game number 1, opening round. Then you win your second round game. There's an additional unit. You win the Sweet 16 game. Now there's an additional unit. And those are multiplied. All of those units are taking together, let's say in the ACC, and they combine all those units for all the schools in the ACC, and the total number of units then gets distributed amongst the league. Again, you want to help everybody in your league. So, but I don't know the number, and I apologize. It's a great question.
No. Again, but I think that it is a great discussion point, because I think the general fan, and most of us do know that the NCAA makes 1.3 billion a year on that tournament, and they got to have their national operating budget. Then they distribute the rest of it out to the schools, right? And I think everybody gets a little bit. Like you said, you participate, you get more. Uh, but let's say it's $7 million for a Power Five team, right? 7 million. A Power Five team, if you're in the Big Ten right now, you're getting $70 million a year from the conference for your football rights, right? Whether you're good or not. Like Rutgers is getting 70 million a year. They didn't make they're not going to make the playoff and generate that much return, but they're getting that money. So it is all relative to the distribution of those dollars. Is that even if the NCAA said, all right, we're going to pay these kids directly, like it may not have as big of an impact of just saying like, you guys get to figure it out on the local level. It's football has become a machine that is driving so much of this industry. Now, the real actual issue that most have in the industry with the NCAA currently in football, the relationship between these two, is that the national office has to operate off of the funds of this tournament, this basketball tournament. The majority of enforcement at the national office is on football. And football contributes no revenue to the NCAA. And so there's some lopsided components to that, is that everyone has said the NCAA has to enforce everything with football, but all those that are in control of the football money aren't letting the NCAA have it. So it's an interesting balance.
That's a great point, Blake. I've never even actually thought of that, but that's so true. So let's say I'm a student athlete, and let's say I'm not in a Power Five. Let's say that I play volleyball, or I run track, or maybe I'm a women's softball player, and I'm hearing about this Opendorse thing. What the heck is this Opendorse thing? And I'm a kid. I'm a student athlete out there, and what do I do? Because if I'm a college athlete right now, I'm figuring out a way to get paid, even if I'm not the starting quarterback at Alabama. I'm still trying to figure out how do I generate revenue. So if I'm that person, and I'm hearing about this Opendorse thing, what is that? What is this Opendorse app? Then what do they do? How do they go about it?
Yeah, Coach. Here, I'll tell you a story. In September of 2023, I was at the Indiana Hoosiers. Had all of their student athletes in Sokol, right? Like, what's the name of their basketball arena? It was beautiful. I love it. I'm standing there, and I got every student athlete in the room, and I said, raise your hand if you want an NIL deal right now. And 300 hands went up. Okay. And I call out one of the athletes. I say, you stand up, and I say, hey, out of these 300 athletes, why should I pick you to do an NIL deal? And he kind of struggled through explaining to me why he was marketable, right? He's a wrestler. He works hard. I said, okay, you got me sold there. Now, what type of NIL deals do you do? He's like, what do you mean? I was like, okay, I'll pay you for an autograph. He said, okay. And I was like, how much do you charge for an autograph? And he said, I don't know. I said, okay, how about $20? Okay. And he said, do you have a contract? No, I don't. Do you have a way to get paid? No, I don't. And I'm like, no, I told him to sit down. I said, how many of you would have answered all these questions the same way? I don't know why you should pick me. I don't know what deals I do. I don't know what to charge. I have no way to sign a contract. I don't have a way to get paid. And all of them raised their hands. I said, so every one of you wants an NIL deal. You want NIL money, but you have no way to get it. Opendorse solves that problem. So I said, get your phone out. You're going to create a profile. It's going to say, I am a wrestler at Indiana. I am interested in hiking, the outdoors, my dog, and my family, right? And then I'm going to say, these photos of me that you get to know me a little bit. Here are different deals I've done in the past. I do shout outs, and they're $20. I do autographs for $50. I do appearances for $100 an hour, right? I do lessons for, $500. Okay. And then one click, I'm paying an athlete, signing a contract all in one click. It's all automatically disclosed, all the payments and transactions. Like, we give athletes the tools to actually do NIL, to run an NIL business. And so that's the gap between the consumer saying NIL is a real thing, the athlete saying NIL is a real thing, is the actual tools to do it. And that's what Opendorse does. We started doing it 12 years ago. And so does that help you understand, like, that there's no way in the world for athletes to get NIL money unless they have a way to intake it. Opendorse is that app that they actually use to do it.
Wow, I'm gonna tell you, Blake. You, like I said at the start, man, you're out in front of the game on this one, and I'm sure there are other people that are popping up trying to copy what you're doing. But you guys have done such a great job with it, and you got to imagine, the student athletes, they really don't know. They talk about the two girls at Miami, the cute girls that play basketball, or the twins, or there's a handful out there that have some real marketability at the front end. Well, all of them do, but they may have had. It's easier to identify what some people's NIL was, but for a lot of people, they don't know how. How would I? How do I go about it? And so you did a great job of explaining that.
Yeah. And I'll do one more, because I think for the listeners, everyone that's listening, and you can think of it too, Coach, like someone in your life that has a skill set. Maybe they sell something at the local farmers market, right? Maybe they sell blankets, and they're like, I want to really take this thing big. They're gonna have to go find a way to launch a website, market it, and list out their offerings and sell it and have shipping and like have consumers trust it. Like that's a big leap. But over the last 10 years, there's been companies like Etsy pop up. They're like, hey, you want to sell things online? We'll take care of the hard stuff. You just make your wares, you list them, and if people want them, like we'll make it easy for them to buy them. Like that's a gap, and that's the gap we fill for athletes, and 100,000 plus use it every day, which is pretty dang cool.
Yeah. Well, Blake, man, I want to thank you for coming on. We've been on here for a good while. I could talk to you for like 5 hours, and we could just go on and on and on because it's fascinating, and this is rapidly changing too, and you're right in the throes of all of it, and it's going to continue to evolve, and there's going to be more lawsuits, and there's going to be more decisions, and so we may have to circle back in a little while and do another one of these. But man, I wish you the best. I'm excited for you, and I think you've done a great job with it. So anyway, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, your compliments mean a lot. I know you've done a lot for student athletes in your career, as knowing my coaches, man, and how much of an impact they have in my life. I just want you to know, like, I didn't play for you, but I know that there's kids out there that wouldn't be where they are without you. So that's probably the other part of this. People need to understand that they're getting paid, but they're also getting a life lesson and good people in their life. So, Coach, I appreciate it.
Okay. Blake, thank you so much. Opendorse. Let's go. Get it done.
Opendorse. Let's do it.
Talk to you soon. Thank you.